think for me, where I approach this is naturally quite a neuroscientific angle. And the thing that's changed the most about my worldview this last year, I would say, is um, I now think there's kind of like, in a way, two different worlds to play in. And in a sense, they both really work because they both exist at the same time, but neither one kind of has primacy over the other in a sense. So you have this like physical world out there, which when you like swing the pendulum, you will get the pendulum swing degrading X times. It's this physical world that has like physical properties that you can conjecture about, provide explanations about that improve over time. And that's very much like Deutschian, like Karl Popper, just like pure scientific method science. But then there's this other world, which is the layer of human perception. And I would say that the kind of, to tie this into the neuroscience angle, um, the strain of thought in neuroscience I'm most excited about at the moment is like this perceptual processing machine, which basically says that like the entire reality we perceive is pretty much entirely constructed in your head based on very limited sensory data, mostly as like a constant prediction for what the next thing that's going to happen is going to be. And it's trying to minimize prediction error constantly. So actually, like I'm going to look at my room, most of my perception of what's happening in my room is already the model that my brain has built of what the room looks like. And it doesn't need very much new data to to keep that model constrained. So actually, it's a lot of it's in your head. And I think these two different layers represent the two different layers that Dawkins and Peterson are talking about. And I'm happy to dig into that way more deeply because that's just a very light brush on that idea that I'm going to start developing as well a little bit more. But I guess in summary, like, the X photon of light doesn't mean you perceive X color. It doesn't mean you perceive, X thing. There's so many layers of perception built into all of, the world you construct for yourself. That something that can be true, something that can be true in the physical world, like it can just be true that there is a steel atom in this point in space, but then something can be true about your perception of that, and they can be two different things. And this is where I think the rubber hits the road for me with the kind of various religious traditions and like, you know, there is so much leeway for you to proactively construct a reality around yourself. And I think where Sam and I talk a lot is the better or worse ways in order that you can construct that reality. And that's where I think the disagreement between Peterson and Dawkins comes in actually, because they're actually just talking about two different realities. And it's like literally like it's literally like a brain on screen. Like Dawkins is on the left as an actual left brain, and Peterson's on the right. There's all these like comments, whereas like Peterson is like, well, let's hit two birds with one stone, and Dawkins like, that's scientifically impossible. You can't hit two birds with one. You know what I mean? Like, whereas like on the one hand, Dawkins is so literally true and so imbibed in like the physical reality of any given situation. Like, how does X atom collide with X produce Y result, or like how do these genes interact to cause that? And Peterson is so, I guess, what Dawkins would call drunk on symbolism, but they're actually just talking about two different ways that things can be true, in my opinion. Like something that can be true about your brain, like the fact that placebo works, even though there's actually no biochemical physical change for a sugar pill doing something, but your belief that something ought to be painful can be super powerful in how you perceive that. Like, for example, there's a very famous case of a builder, a scaffolder in the UK who jumped off some scaffolding and he saw this nail come through his boot and he's lying on the floor writhing in pain. There's this like long rusty nail like poking out of his shoe. The ambulance arrives, they administer like analgesics, like powerful painkillers, and then they take off his boot and it had gone between his toes. But his expectation was such, like, so deep in the fact that, my whole model of reality at this point thinks that this has gone through my foot, therefore I expect the pain to be coming from there, is my point basically. It's like it wasn't the actual reality of the situation, but that was true at the psychological layer of this guy's brain. Therefore, that caused his reality to literally shift, even though there was no, again, change to the underlying. There was no set of steel atoms that had pushed through the nervous tissue in his foot that had caused, the neurons to fire a pain signal to his brain. Like it was actually the other way around. It was like his perception of the situation had back propagated the fact that he should be in pain down to his foot. And that's, where his model had come. And so, I just like, I've also done a little ramble here, but I think this is where I think you cannot get daylight between Dawkins and Pearson because you've literally got a left brain and a right brain talking to each other. And I love that comment from Alex O'Connor, where he's like, I'm actually a corpus callosum in this conversation because he is literally the one trying to connect these two completely different universes together. And I think the people who are going to do really well in the 21st century, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, are the people who really understand this concept of like how something could be true at the psychological layer and not like lose the fact that just because it's not literally true or a literal fact about reality doesn't mean it's not true about how people frame or interpret a situation. And I think that for me is a nice segue into the rest of this conversation as well.